Welcome to Unfiltered Reflections. I'm your host, Passion, and today we're diving into the currents that run deep beneath the surface of our lives, currents that often steer our ships without us even realizing it. We're going to explore the invisible threads that connect us, or sometimes subtly pull us apart in ways that transcend simple likes and dislikes. Imagine a world woven with countless, almost imperceptible strands, each one carrying a different weight, a different texture, a different sheen. These threads influence where we live, how we speak, what we dream, and most profoundly, how we relate to one another. Today, we're not just scratching the surface, we're digging into the rich, sometimes rocky soil where our connections take root. We're talking about the silent language of belonging, of aspiration, of expectation, and how it shapes the very fabric of our relationships. I want to tell you a story. It's a story about Ilara, a woman who lived in a city carved from both ancient stone and gleaming chrome. A city where the skyline was a jagged testament to ambition, and the shadows beneath it held a different kind of truth. Ilara herself was a creature of quiet resilience, her eyes holding the depth of 1,000 untold stories. Her hands, though often calloused from her work, moved with a surprising grace. Ilara grew up in the lower districts, where the buildings huddled together like weary old men, their windows staring out at the world with a resigned gaze. The air down there always smelled of damp earth and something sweet, like overripe fruit, a scent that was both comforting and a little sad. Her family, like many in their district, worked with their hands. Her mother, a weaver of intricate patterns on worn fabrics, and her father, a craftsman who could coax beauty from discarded metal. Their lives were a constant, careful dance with scarcity, a choreography of making do, of finding joy in the small, hard-won victories. They were rich in spirit, in laughter that echoed in their small apartment, but not in the kind of richness that bought gilded cages or swift, silent transportation. One evening, under the glow of the district's single flickering street lamp, Ilara encountered a man named Julian. Julian was, in every outward sense, Ilara's opposite. He moved with the effortless confidence of someone who had never known want. His clothes, though simple, spoke of a quality that whispered of unspoken expense. He carried himself with an almost regal air, not arrogant, but simply accustomed to a certain kind of space, a certain kind of deference. They met at the edge of the old market, where Ilara was selling her mother's woven scarves, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the dim surroundings. Julian, lost on a photographic expedition, had stumbled into the lower districts, drawn by the raw, unpolished beauty he found there. Their initial conversation was a delicate ballet of curiosity and caution. Julian, captivated by the intricate designs of a scarf, asked Ilara about the dyes, the patterns, the stories woven into the fabric. Ilara, surprised by his genuine interest, found herself opening up, sharing tales of her mother's hands, of generations of women who had passed down these skills. There was a spark, undeniable and immediate, a connection that felt almost magical in its suddenness. They talked for hours, the hum of the city fading into the background as their voices intertwined. But even as they spoke, a subtle current ran beneath their words, a silent acknowledgement of the different worlds they inhabited. Julian, with his easy questions about travel and art galleries, and Ilara, with her quiet references to the cost of thread and the unpredictable nature of the harvest. Neither of them spoke of their backgrounds directly, yet their language, their assumptions, their very perspectives on the world painted a vivid picture. This brings us to a crucial point: how we perceive and interact with others. It's often filtered through the lens of our own experiences, our own upbringing, and the assumptions we've absorbed about those around us. These assumptions can be as subtle as the way we phrase a question, or as overt as the expectations we carry into a new acquaintance. Think about it, the innocence, astounding question: what do you do for a living? On the surface, it's a simple inquiry, but beneath it, there can be a quiet assessment, a calculation of worth, of where someone fits into the grand scheme of things. The answer, often, becomes a shorthand for so much more: for education, for financial stability, for perceived social standing. It's a quick way to place someone on an unspoken hierarchy, isn't it? Similarly, where do you live can carry a similar weight. It's not just about geography, it's about the perceived value of that geography, the unspoken implications of its proximity to power, to privilege, to comfort. For Alara and Julian, these unspoken cues were everywhere. Julian, though genuinely interested in Alara, couldn't help but notice the worn edges of her tunic, the slight tremor in her hands when she spoke of her family's struggles. Alara, in turn, observed the almost unconscious way Julian pulled out a sleek, expensive device to check the time, the ease with which he spoke of spontaneous trips to distant lands. These weren't judgments, not in a malicious sense, but simply observations, data points that the mind collects, unconsciously sorting and categorizing. These silent assessments become particularly pronounced, even amplified, in the delicate dance of dating and romantic relationships. We often idealize love as a force that transcends all boundaries, a blind, all-consuming passion. And while love certainly has that capacity, the reality is that the invisible threads we're discussing today often play a significant, if unacknowledged, role in shaping our romantic preferences and the very dynamics of our intimate connections. As Alara and Julian's connection deepened, as their conversations stretched into late nights and their hands occasionally brushed in the dim light of the market, another, more substantial current began to assert itself. The quiet, often unspoken reality of their differing material circumstances. For Alara, every decision was weighed against its practical implications. A new pair of shoes meant careful budgeting. A rare treat was savored for its sheer extravagance. Her world was one of careful management, of making sure the scales always balanced, however precariously. Julian, on the other hand, lived in a world where such considerations were largely absent. His parents, successful architects, had provided a life of abundant comfort. He pursued his photography with a passionate intensity, unburdened by the need for immediate commercial success. He could afford to experiment, to explore, to simply be. This disparity, while never explicitly discussed, was a constant, subtle presence. When Julian suggested a spontaneous weekend trip to a coastal town, Alara felt a familiar tightening in her chest. She couldn't just go. There were responsibilities, the need to contribute to her family's meager income, the simple, practical impossibility of it. She would politely decline, offering a vague excuse about family obligations, feeling a pang of something akin to shame, even though she knew it was irrational. Julian, sensing her hesitation, would try to bridge the gap, offering to cover her expenses, but his offers, though well-intentioned, only deepened Alara's discomfort. It felt like charity, a constant reminder of the imbalance. This is a profoundly complex and often unspoken issue in relationships. While we rarely speak of it directly, the presence or absence of financial ease carries a significant weight. The disparity in resources, however much we try to ignore it, can create subtle power imbalances. One partner might, without ever intending to, feel the constant pressure of providing, while the other might experience a quiet sense of dependency or even a stifling of their own desires. Think of the small, everyday choices that become magnified: where to eat, what gifts to exchange, how to spend leisure time. For Alara, a simple dinner out was an indulgence. For Julian, it was a casual affair. These seemingly minor differences, when accumulated over time, can create a chasm, a sense of living on different planes. They can lead to unspoken resentments, to feelings of inadequacy, or to a quiet frustration that gnaws at the edges of affection. However, it's absolutely crucial to understand that this influence is not a death sentence for a relationship. Far from it. Many couples, perhaps most, navigate these differences with remarkable grace and strength. The key often lies in open communication, in mutual respect, and in a shared commitment to building a life together, one where both partners feel valued and secure. It's about understanding that while material circumstances might differ, the underlying values, the shared dreams, the fundamental kindness and respect are what truly matter. It's about finding ways to bridge the gap, not by erasing the differences, but by acknowledging them and building something new together. So how do Alara and Julian, and indeed, how do we navigate these complex, often unspoken currents? The answer, as it so often is in life's most challenging endeavors, lies in the power of communication. Open, honest, and empathetic dialogue is the bridge that can span the widest chasms. For Alara and Julian, this meant learning to speak a new language, not just of words, but of understanding. One evening, After Alara had once again declined a trip to a distant art exhibition, Julian, instead of pressing, simply sat with her in silence. Then he asked, not about the exhibition, but about her day, about her mother's weaving, about the small joys and quiet struggles that filled her world. And Alara, feeling seen, truly seen, began to speak, not with excuses, but with the raw, honest truth of her life. She spoke of the constant calculations, the worry, the quiet pride in her family's resilience. Julian listened, not with pity, but with a growing understanding, a dawning realization of the intricate web of responsibilities that governed Alara's every move. And then it was Alara's turn to listen. Julian, in turn, spoke of his own pressures, the unspoken expectations from his family, the quiet burden of privilege that sometimes felt like a gilded cage. He spoke of his desire to make his own way, to create something meaningful, not just inherit it. In that exchange, a new kind of intimacy bloomed, one rooted in a deeper comprehension of each other's realities. This kind of communication, this willingness to truly listen and to be truly heard, is paramount. It begins with a deep dive into our own perspectives. We have to ask ourselves, what assumptions am I bringing to this interaction? How has my own background shaped the way I see the world, the way I interpret someone else's choices? For Alara, it was the assumption that Julian couldn't possibly understand her world. For Julian, it was the assumption that his offers of help would be universally appreciated without considering the nuances of pride and independence. Here are some ways we can all cultivate this kind of transformative dialogue. First, be mindful of your own assumptions. Take a moment to reflect on your own journey, your own upbringing, and how it might subtly color your perceptions. Where did you learn about success, about worth, about status? Acknowledging our own lens is the first step to seeing clearly. Second, listen actively and empathetically. This means more than just hearing words. It means trying to understand the emotional landscape behind them. How does your partner, or friend, or colleague experience the world? What are their fears, their hopes, their quiet anxieties related to their daily existence? Third, avoid making generalizations. The world is far too rich and varied for stereotypes. Not everyone from a particular background shares the same experiences or perspectives. We are all individuals, complex and multifaceted. Alara's experience was her own, not a blanket statement for everyone in her district. Julian's experience was his own, not a universal truth for everyone of his means. And finally, focus on shared values and goals. While our external circumstances might differ, our core human desires often align. Do you both value kindness, honesty, a desire for growth, a commitment to community? These are the foundational elements upon which strong relationships are built, transcending the superficial markers of where we come from or what we possess. It's also vital to remember that the invisible threads we're discussing today exist on a spectrum, not as rigid binary categories. Life is not an either-or proposition. People who appear to come from similar backgrounds can have vastly different experiences, and conversely, individuals from seemingly disparate worlds can share profound commonalities. Alara and Julian, for all their differences, shared a deep appreciation for beauty. Alara in the intricate patterns of her mother's weaving, Julian in the fleeting moments captured by his camera. They both possessed a fierce independence, a quiet determination to forge their own paths. These shared values, these common aspirations, became the bedrock of their evolving relationship. Instead of clinging to stereotypes, which are often reductive and harmful, we must embrace nuance and complexity. The world is a tapestry woven with countless threads of identity: our gender, our race, our sexual orientation, our abilities, our beliefs, and these threads intertwine with and influence the silent currents we're exploring today. Acknowledging this fluidity, this intersectionality, allows us to see the whole person, not just a simplified label. Ultimately, building genuine, respectful, and equitable relationships across these invisible lines requires a deep commitment. A commitment to understanding, to empathy, and to that crucial brave act of open communication. It means recognizing that the assumptions and power dynamics that often perpetuate inequalities are not inherent, but constructed. And what is constructed can be deconstructed, challenged, and rebuilt. So how do we actively foster more equitable relationships? How do we challenge the invisible structures that sometimes divide us? First, challenge social norms. Question the assumptions that are often embedded in our everyday interactions. Why do we ask certain questions? What expectations do we carry into a new meeting? Are these expectations serving us, or are they subtly reinforcing old divisions? Second, promote cross connection and collaboration. Seek out opportunities to truly connect with people whose lives and experiences differ from your own. Join a community project, volunteer, explore new neighborhoods, engage in conversations that stretch your understanding. Learn from their perspectives, not just about them. Alara and Julian, through their unlikely friendship, slowly began to bridge their worlds, not by erasing them, but by sharing them. Julian started spending more time in the lower districts, not just as an observer, but as a participant, helping Alara's family with small tasks, learning about their traditions. Alara, in turn, ventured into Julian's world, seeing the vast, gleaming galleries, the quiet, disciplined work of his parents, understanding the pressures that came with a different kind of life. And finally, advocate for a more just world. Support policies and initiatives that actively work to dismantle systemic inequalities. Because while individual connections are powerful, true change often requires addressing the larger structures that shape our lives. Alara and Julian's story is still unfolding. Their journey isn't easy, and the invisible threads of their different worlds still tug at them sometimes. But they've learned to acknowledge those tugs, to speak about them, to navigate them with a shared understanding and a deep well of affection. They've learned that true connection isn't about erasing differences, but about embracing them, about weaving them into a stronger, richer tapestry. The story of Alara and Julian, like all our stories, is a testament to the profound and often unspoken ways that our lives are shaped by the subtle forces around us. It's a story about the complex dance of connection, about the courage it takes to look beyond the surface, and about the quiet, persistent influence of one's inherited standing. If you've enjoyed this episode, please visit our website at Deszicakes.com. Thanks for joining me on Unfiltered Reflection. Until next time, be kind to yourself, keep exploring, and remember, you are worthy, you are seen, and you are loved.